guys, welcome back. So I'm super excited to be starting this reading vlog. In this video, I'm going to be reading It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is a book that has had so much attention lately, so much controversy. So many people are on like both sides of like the camp for this book. Some people either love it or some people hate it, and the people who hate it really hate it. And some of the really popular YouTubers that I watch, some of my favorite YouTubers, like despise this book. But everything that I've heard about it, I don't really get it. I mean, I get the whole thing. So I guess the book is about like domestic violence, and is based on Colleen Hoover's mom, I think. And I get like not marketing that kind of book to young women, to young adults, not marketing it as a romance. Like that makes sense. But I don't understand like why people are making such a big deal about it. I guess there are so many worse books out there. Well, I guess I can't say that because I haven't read it yet. But from what I've heard, it seems like there's such worse books out there. And there are a lot of really bad, really toxic, really, I feel like potentially harming books that are actually marketed to young adults, that are literal young adult like books. And I guess I just don't get it. So I've been looking forward to reading this one so I can see what all the hype is about, see how I feel, see which side of the fence I'm on. It takes a lot to like dissuade me from a book. I have had experience with like domestic violence in the past, not me myself, but my mom. We have history of domestic violence in our family. My childhood was not the best because of that. So I don't know, it could end up being triggering for all I know. I don't know. But I've mentioned in the past that I actually like books like that. I like books that make me angry, that upset me, that I don't even really mind so much if a book is like triggering. For the most part, I try to either push past it when I can, or I know when I need to like walk away. And I just feel like, it's not an author's job to like say, oh, I shouldn't write this because some young girl might pick it up someday. Like that's not their job. It's not their job to police what young women are picking up. There are tons of books about domestic violence, about sexual abuse, about child abuse, about all kinds of things. And I just feel like this book is getting a lot of hate for what it's about, when there are a lot of books about these same topics, about these same hard topics, hard conversations. And so I guess I don't know why this is being made such a big deal about. So I'm excited to read it and see, like I said, what I think, if I feel the same way, or if I just don't think it's that big a deal. So yeah, come along with me as I read this one, and I'll update you along the way.
Simon & Schuster Audio presents It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover.
Hey guys, welcome back. So it is like a week later from when I filmed that intro. I got like hooked into some other books that I was trying to finish, and I also had some back issues going on, so I haven't read very much. But I did start It Ends With Us today. I just finished the first part. There's 10 parts, I believe, to the audiobook, and I just finished part 1, so I wanted to give my thoughts on how I think it's going so far. Part 1 ended on chapter 3, and so I took some notes down as I listened. So far, I mean, there's definitely some shitty things going on, but so the book starts out with Lily standing on the ledge of the roof of a like high-rise building. She says she's not suicidal, she just likes like the view from up there, I guess. And she has just come from her father's funeral, and as she's up there, a man comes up. His name is Ryle, and they start talking. And to me, so far, it just seems like your typical like insta lovey. She sees him and immediately notes how beautiful he is. They strike up a conversation. She's immediately starting to have feelings for him. But so far, it's not like really any different than any other contemporary romance, you know, that has like the insta love trope. You know, the guy comes up and he is like, he doesn't know she's there at first, and he starts kicking like the furniture, like the patio furniture they have up there, and he's like kicking it and throwing it, and like just immediately has this like display of like anger and violence, which is probably foreshadowing for later on, I would imagine. That's probably not your best like first impression to make on somebody, but of course she doesn't take it that way. She sees it as like it's a healthy outlet, you know, it's an inanimate object. And for someone who grew up with a violent, abusive father, I'm sure that seeing a man taking his anger out on an inanimate object rather than on a person is probably a big thing, and probably has a positive impact on her. She sees it as a good thing that he's taking his anger out and his frustration out on a chair that, you know, doesn't matter rather than a person. But she's also meeting this guy on the day of her father's funeral. She just gave his eulogy. So she's emotional, she's raw, she's vulnerable. And of course, this is when she meets this man. So she's definitely not in the best like headspace. She's probably not thinking clearly. She hasn't had a good, you know, the best role models. So she notes, you know, how beautiful he is and that he is several years older than her. And when they're talking, she thinks, you know, like, oh, he really sees me, or he's really looking at me. And so for someone who's probably never paid that much attention to as a child, having someone give her their undivided attention and really pay attention to her, again, is probably creating that sense of like love, and that like sense of like she's finally the center of someone's attention. And so she ignores the fact that he's a lot older than her, that he's already displaying these like tendencies of anger and violence. And he asks her, like, one of the very first things he asks her is where she lives, or if she lives, what apartment she lives in, because they're in a high rise. And literally they've known each other for like a couple minutes, and he's already asking her what apartment she lives in. Luckily, she doesn't live in that apartment building, but she does tell him, a complete stranger, what building she does live in. She points it out and tells him what building she lives in. She doesn't tell him the exact apartment, but he now knows exactly what building she lives in, a complete stranger. So stupid move number one. Then he's using, you know, like blatant pickup lines, asking if she has a boyfriend, things like that. He tells her, you know, you're not like most people, which, again, a common like trope. He tells her that they start revealing like what they call naked truths to each other. So they start telling each other like truths about themselves. And I forget exactly what it is he tells her, but he's like, I wouldn't usually tell people this. So he's, you know, she's flattered because he's telling her things that he wouldn't tell other people. He trusts her already, even though they've known each other for all 5 minutes. He's a doctor who makes a lot of money, and she comments on the Burberry shirt he's wearing and his supposed $200 haircut, and that he's in a different tax bracket than her. So she is, you know, kind of wowed and astounded by their differences, like the differences in their lives. And she tells him about the domestic violence between her parents, and which is something, again, she says she doesn't usually tell people, you know, so she's comfortable enough to tell him this, and that she feels guilty for not doing more to help her mom. And after she's just confided this in him and told him that, you know, her dad was physically abusive to her mom for her whole, you know, life, her whole childhood up until his death. He tells her there's no such thing as bad people. There's just people who sometimes do bad things. So he's basically like gaslighting her and coming up with like excuses, and basically setting himself up to be able to someday say, oh, I'm not a bad person. I just did a bad thing, or I did the wrong thing. That doesn't make me a bad person. And so the one good thing that I liked so far was that she actually, so her mom asked her to do her father's eulogy and kind of forced her into it. And so at the church, in front of the family, in front of friends, in front of all these people, she goes up to do the eulogy and doesn't say anything. She told the mom she didn't know what to say. And her mom says, we'll just go up and say 5 things that were great about your father. And so she goes up and she just as like a brief like introduction, like, my name is Lily. I'm here to, you know, talk about my dad and I'm going to tell you about 5 great things about him. And then stops talking and doesn't say anything else, because there are no great things about him, because he was abusive to her mom, and was a piece of shit, basically. So that is so far like the best part of this book. As someone who grew up in a household where like emotional and sometimes physical abuse was like prevalent, good for her, like, good fucking job. But he kind of, like I said, just kind of like blows it off. Then, so he's definitely showing some like shady tendencies. He's an asshole. We can tell that already. But not that much different than other guys we've seen in other contemporary romances, for people to be losing their minds this much. Obviously, I'm only 3 chapters in, so there's still a lot to happen. But the biggest like asshole move for this guy was that, so they're telling each other these naked truths, and he tells one of his truths, or she tells him, tell me like the last thought that popped into your mind or something. And he tells her that he wants to have sex with her. Like, he's like flat out says he wants to have sex with her. And she's so thrown off, and oh my god, this worldly smart doctor wants to have sex with me. And he says, if you were into one night stands, I would take you downstairs to my room right now. And he's like, I know, like, that's, you know, very forward of me, but I'm a guy and you're very beautiful. What does that have to do with anything? Like, just, I don't know why people have that mindset of like, oh, boys will be boys, or men are just whatever, like, able to say things like that. And so he tells her this after she just told him about her abusive father. She just told him that her father died. She just told him that she just attended her father's funeral, and that her mom is now pissed off at her because of what she did to the eulogy. And you think it's appropriate to tell her that you want to have sex with her. Then he pulls the chairs they're sitting in, he pulls her to him and starts touching her, and like shoves his hand up her shirt. And while she does not actually tell him no, she doesn't actually say the words no. So he's not like forcing her, but he's also kind of not really giving her a choice. He just does it. He doesn't ask her first. He doesn't like wait to see if she'll consent, doesn't wait to see if she says no, just does it. And again, she just buried her father. She's vulnerable. You know, she's really not in the like state of mind to be having this happen to her. And then he tells her, like, oh, they're talking about how he doesn't want to get married, he doesn't want to have a wife, he doesn't want to have kids, he only cares about like success in his career. And she says that she could not be with someone or sleep with someone who was going to just be a one-night stand, or who she didn't see herself having a relationship with. And he tells her, okay, so you wouldn't have sex with someone, like a one-night stand, but how far would you go? Like, okay, so you won't go all the way, but what will you let me do to you, basically? And then as he's like forcing himself upon her, essentially, his phone rings, and it's the hospital calling to call him in, he's on call, whatever. And just randomly takes a picture of her before he leaves. Like, doesn't ask, doesn't say anything, just whips out his phone and takes a picture of her. And she thinks this is like the height of romance. So she's an idiot and he's an asshole, basically, so far. But again, not that much different from other things I've read. I've definitely read worse. So yeah, those are all the notes for part 1. We'll see what happens. There was a part where they were talking about the mom. The mom calls her and suggests that she move to Boston, where Lily lives, now that the dad is dead. And Lily does not want that to happen. Also, Lily has talked about several years prior, when she was still in high school, there was a homeless kid. It's not a man. They kind of made it seem like it was a man at first, but it was actually a senior in her class, in her high school, who's homeless, who so far it seems like his parents kicked him out and was staying in the abandoned house behind them. And it seems like she had some kind of relationship with him. His name is Atlas, which I believe he comes back into the picture somehow, I think. But so right now we have 2 kind of POVs of current day, her after the father died and meeting Ryle, which was a terrible name. Speaking of that, and then like reading through her journal entries from when she was younger in high school and everything that happened with Atlas. So speaking of names, like so far the biggest like tragedy, like the most atrocious part of this book so far, is this girl's name. Like, her name is Lily Blossom Bloom. Why? Like, terrible. So far, that is the worst part of this book. Why are we not making a bigger deal about that? So yeah, I'll go on to part 2 now, and I will give you my kind of updates after that. Yeah, so it's a couple days later. I haven't read or listened to, I guess, any more of It Ends With Us. Work has been super busy, so I haven't been able to listen to any more of it. But I definitely plan on doing so tomorrow. Ray actually has a copy now as well, so I think she's reading it. I don't think she really does audiobooks. But she is about at the same part that I am, or at least she was as of earlier today, and we both had so many of the same thoughts. So far, just kind of on the fence, not really sure what, like, the whole drama is around this book at this point. I mean, I'm not very far in, but so far nothing has happened that's, like, I don't know, that I wouldn't expect in, like, I don't know. I've definitely read, like, abusive men with these kinds of, like, red flags, and just, like, immediately noticeable, like, faults and, like, character defects in other books. So I'm not sure why, like, the hate about this one is so strong at this point. So who knows, that could change by the end of this vlog. Maybe I will have a completely different opinion by the end, but so far, a couple of chapters in, I am not sure what all the drama is about. But yeah, I'm gonna keep listening to it, see what else happens, where we get, and then I will check back in after that. Hey guys, welcome back. So today is Monday, March 6th, and I have just finished listening to the audiobook of It Ends With Us. I have a lot of thoughts. I just typed out, well, over the course of listening to it, I have typed out notes, and today's notes alone are 4 pages long. Just my thoughts, my impressions, my opinions, things that I thought were going to happen that did happen, or things that I thought were going to happen that did not. Few things before I start. One, this last half of this review, or this wrap up, I guess, of my reading experience of this book are going to be kind of generalized. I'm not going to only, like, fully reference specific events in the book. I think I did that in earlier clips. This is going to be a little bit more generalized, based on my thoughts and, like, general opinions on what happened in the latter half of the book. So there's that. 2, these are just my opinions. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion. I feel like this book is very divisive. People either love it or they hate it. I see a lot of comments, people who hated it commenting on videos and stuff, and, you know, everything, of people who loved it, and people who loved it commenting on the videos and everything of people who hated it. So I don't want that to happen in my, in the comments here. Again, these are just my opinions. If they are the complete opposite of yours, then that's fine. We are each entitled to our own opinions. Also, the next thing is that I am coming at this, or I went into this reading experience as someone who has experience with this. I grew up in this type of household. It wasn't an everyday thing. It wasn't an all the time thing. It was an occasional thing, which in no way excuses it or makes it okay. But I have witnessed domestic violence towards my mother in many situations. That was actually the reason why I ended up moving out when I did, when I was 20, I think I was. Not even, I think I was like 19. I moved out because of domestic violence, and because my mom took back the person who abused her. So this isn't, I don't know, my opinions aren't, like, just pulled out of thin air. They aren't just made I don't know, with no experience. I have experience with this. So these are my thoughts and opinions coming from someone who has been in this situation, who has witnessed these types of things. And that's not to say that other people have not. I know that, unfortunately, domestic violence is a prevalent thing. But that kind of thing affects everybody differently. And my thoughts on it may be different than somebody else's. So anyways, first of all, I want to say that, let me just get this out of the way right now and say that I don't understand what all the hate towards this book is. I don't get it. I'll get more into that towards the end, but let me just start by saying that I don't get it. So if you're wanting this video to be me hating on this book and me not hating on it is going to make you mad, then don't even bother watching the rest of it, because that's not what this is. So first of all, if I'm looking over here because I have my notes over here. I've kind of listed things out. First of all, setting aside the subject matter and the controversial nature of the book. Those of you, or the people who say that one of the things they don't like is that just the writing in and of itself in Colleen Hoover's books is bad, I just don't agree. I think this is the 4th Colleen Hoover book I've read, I believe, and I have liked all of them. They are definitely, the subject matter is not typical. They are not your straightforward romances. There are difficult things in all of them. Verity is still one of the craziest books that I've ever read, but I don't think that her writing is bad in any way, other than her choice in names. She picks the weirdest names. I'll give you all that. But I think that her books are really well written. They're engaging. They are relatable. This book was so relatable. It made me cry. It made me angry. It made me sad. It was triggering. It brought back a lot of memories, things that I don't think about often or talk about often. They're not too long. They're not too short. They keep you kind of guessing right up to the end of how it's going to end and what's going to happen. Like I said, things that I thought were going to happen did not, and things that I saw coming did. And I think they're just generally really readable. Every time I start one of her books, I get sucked in. And this one I did, I didn't read as quickly because one, it was a little bit triggering, so I had to stop sometimes. But two, I was trying to finish up some other books. But had I done what I wanted, I could have sat through and listened to this entire audiobook in one day. I just read 50% of it, or listened to, I guess, 50% of it today. When I started this morning, there's 10 parts of this book. When I started this morning, I was on part 4. And I got to part 10 in one day. So I think her writing is very good. So I don't agree with that, first of all. I have heard a lot of people say that this book should not be marketed as a romance, that, it's not a contemporary romance, and I agree with you, it's not. I think it shows the reality, the realness of being a human being. Humans aren't perfect. They're flawed. They don't always make the right decisions, especially in cases like this of trauma and pain and emotional, damage. I don't think these books are any worse than some of the dark, mafia romances that I've read. I have read a lot of books that I think are a lot more damaging and harmful than this one. Yes, I see that the subject matter is difficult. I'm not disputing that. It was definitely difficult to read in certain parts, but people who are hating on this book so completely, but then love these dark mafia romances with men who are out killing people, but then somehow still perfect angels and sweet to their wives, I don't think that's realistic at all. And if anything, I think that sets more of a false example for impressionable young women than this book does. I think this was very real and very authentic, especially to Colleen Hoover's own experience. Every domestic violence experience is different. Every situation is different. Every person is different. So how one person reacts in that kind of situation is going to be completely different to how someone else will react. If there is a woman who is able to put her feelings aside, put her emotions aside, disassociate, and walk away the first time a man ever lays a hand on her, good for her, more power to her. But that's not everybody's experience. That's just not the reality. And to look down on a woman who wouldn't or who is unable to is just wrong. And it's essentially victim blaming. It's wrong. And to not like this book because she didn't just walk away is wrong. Because that's just not the reality of it. Not in most situations. But I'll get more into that later on. So when I started listening again, earlier, I was, like I said, I was 4 parts into, I was on the 4th part out of 10. So I was essentially 40% into the book. I really enjoyed, the way that we really got to see Lily's thought process in this book. We really got to see her, see her thoughts. We really got to be inside her head. We got to see the turmoil, the confusion, the way she was unsure, the uncertainty, the conflicting emotions. She doesn't just immediately explain things away with the first time that Ryle hurts her. Yes, she has conflicting emotions. Yes, part of her tries to rationalize. But she doesn't just immediately push it away. She, it does remind her of her father. She is triggered. We do see her curl up and have those flashbacks and respond to her trauma and in her trauma. And I think that was really realistic. She didn't just immediately pop up and act like nothing ever happened. She does allow him to apologize and does stay and gets back in bed with him, which Jess is a red flag. But again, it's real. And she knows it's wrong. She's not trying to explain it away to herself. She knows he's wrong. She knows the way she's responding is wrong. And her heart and her mind are being pulled into opposite directions. She was raised in a household where this was what she witnessed, almost every day or whatever the case was. This was the example that was set for her of her mother just explaining it away and moving on and not leaving. And so when that's the example that's set for you, it's hard to break that cycle. Like I said, as someone who has experienced it, I can tell you that it is hard to break that cycle, to ignore the things that you've witnessed and that you were raised witnessing and understanding from a more mature perspective that it's not right and that it can't just be explained away. I don't agree with people who say that this book perpetuates abuse, that it is romanticizing. I think I said this already, but romanticizing domestic abuse. I don't think that it does at all. I think this book really puts you into Lily's mindset and puts you into the mindset of the victim. And again, I think it was very realistic and authentic. Again, as someone who's been there, seeing things from Lily's perspective and seeing the way she went from thinking that her mom was weak for taking the abuse and accepting it and never leaving her father, to realizing that her mom was actually very strong. And now being in her mother's shoes and understanding things from her mother's perspective, I think was really well done and was just another layer that was added into the story. And really made me think about my own situation and my own mom, and just kind of that self-reflection. And I think that's a huge thing. People who say just leave, why don't why didn't they just leave? Or how can she stay with him? Or, you know, that thought process. I think people like that just don't understand. You will never understand who you are in that situation. You can be a grown, mature, independent, feminist, adult woman, strong woman now outside of that situation and say that you would leave, you would call the police, you would whatever. In that moment, you don't know until it actually happens to you what your reaction would be, what you would do, if you would actually get up and leave and walk out. And the reality is that even if you did do that, there's a good chance that that man who just hit you, or whatever the case is going to let you leave. There is an element of fear, and I think that is forgotten a lot too. There are so many, it's not just about the physical side of it. It's also the mental side, the emotional side. There's the fear, the fear that he could, if you tried to leave, if you physically get up and try to walk out, he may stop you. He may just hit you again. He could break a leg. He could lock you in a bedroom. He could lock you in that house and not let you out. And it's not always a man. I shouldn't only say he, but, you know, obviously in this case, it was a man in this book. But there's the fear of, you know, like the financial side of it. I have no money. I don't have a job. Where am I going to go? Who's going to, you know, how am I going to support myself? If there's kids, that's just a whole other layer to it. And I think people are just so focused on the physical side of it that they forget the emotional side of it and the mental side of it. I appreciate that Colleen Hoover included Lily, not necessarily trying to rationalize Ryle's actions, but understanding that her own trauma and her own lived experiences, the things that she had witnessed, the example that was set for her, that those things could have been coloring her perception of what was happening. Yes, he was wrong. In this case, yes, he was absolutely wrong. And it was abuse, and she should leave, and all of those things. But she still understands that her trauma is also playing a part into it, and that's a huge part of it too. There are times when I have to put aside my own trauma or my own past to understand that, like, you know, you can't, just because one person or one man is terrible doesn't mean that every man you ever meet will be terrible. You can't close yourself off completely and lose trust in every person, every man you ever meet based on one experience, you know, in your childhood, and just write people off completely. Like, you have to understand that your trauma and the things you've been through and your past experiences might influence your emotions and your thought processes now. And so I appreciate that Colleen Hoover did include that and did have Lily process those things and think those things, and understand that while he is wrong, those things are playing into it as well. And again, I don't want anybody to think that I'm like excusing any of the behavior or saying that this isn't a book about domestic violence or about abuse, because it absolutely is. There are tons of red flags. You know, Ryle, there's an incident in the kitchen the first time that he harms her, and he lies to his sister and says that she slipped on olive oil. Obviously, that is a huge red flag. If you're lying to the people around you about what really happened, if you have to lie, it wasn't an accident. If in the moment you say it's an accident, but then you turn around and tell the people around you a completely different story, then obviously it wasn't an accident, because if it was an accident, there's no reason to need to change the story. So there are tons of red flags. You know, a huge part of this book is Atlas and the way he comes back into Lily's life. I appreciated that this wasn't like a full like love triangle where he was really super involved in the whole story. It was really more about Ryle and Lily, and then Atlas had his moments. Unfortunately, the reality is that a lot of women don't have a knight in shining armor to come in and defend them or protect them or take them in, whatever the case is. And I do like that they had that history. He came back in at the right time, and he kind of came in and out of the story at the perfect time, I think. And it never became like a full love triangle type scenario. Anise, I don't remember what this is named now, but she, I think, is wrong. She was wrong. She, the signs were there. She heard the stories and she just took them at face value and accepted them when all the signs were there. In the end, she does tell Lily, if you go back to him, I'll never speak to you again. Which isn't the best response, but it's something. At least she did tell her that she shouldn't go back to him. Marshall, Ryle's best friend, and Elise, I think her name's Elise, her husband is a jackass because this is his best friend, and he knows what's going on. And if your best friend is calling you to be in the same room or to be a witness in a conversation with your wife in case you lose your temper, like, that man's an asshole for being okay with doing that. I think it was very clear from the beginning that, and I don't remember if I said this in an earlier clip, but it was very clear from the beginning that Ryle he knew this about himself. He knew that he has this temper, that he loses control. And from the very beginning, he tells her, I don't think there are bad people. There are just people who do bad things. Bullshit. Like, that is just an excuse. That is just a red flag in and of itself. That is you setting up a narrative for your future mistakes. So that was just a red flag from 5 minutes in. And then he tells her, ever since this thing happened in his childhood that caused him to have his own trauma, there are things that I can't control. I black out. I get very angry. That's fine. Some people can't control their anger. But then you do something about it, get help or whatever. That's not an excuse to abuse your wife, to ever lay your hand on anyone, let alone your wife. It's really telling when Lily talks about how, like, when she's having like an internal monologue and she's talking about how Ryle does this thing, or doesn't do this thing actually, that her father did. So her father used to make the mother park outside because he had to park in the garage, and didn't matter if it was raining, snowing, if the weather was horrible, whatever. The mom had to park outside and walk into the house in the rain, snow, sleet, whatever, it didn't matter. And the father's car was inside. And because Ryle doesn't do that to her, she thinks that he's not like his father, because he does this thing that is like common decency, that is like the bare minimum that her father didn't do, because that was the example except for her. She thinks that it can't be that he's abusive because he doesn't make me park outside, or he would never make me park outside like my father did to my mom. So because she didn't see her father do the bare minimum, when Ryle does do it, to her that means that he's not as bad as her father, that he's not abusive like her father was. I am going to give a little bit of a spoiler away. The pregnancy, I saw that coming. I feel like that's, if you've ever watched like a Lifetime movie, I feel like that should have been expected. I kind of knew that was going to happen. There was a part where she says, actually, before I say that, so again, for people who hate this book, I don't understand what is making y'all so mad. Is it the fact that she didn't leave right away? That she considered staying? That it took her so long to contemplate whether she was going to stay or if she was going to leave? That she rationalized or tried to rationalize his behavior? That some part of her blamed herself? Because all those things are so human, and so real, I feel like, and I don't understand what there's so mad about that. And there's a quote from the book that I think really like encompasses that perfectly. It says, so many people wonder why the women don't leave. Where are all the people who wonder why the men are abusive in the first place? Isn't that where the only blame should be placed? So I don't see anybody saying anything about being mad that this happens to women and that this is such a common occurrence in our society, that I'm sure probably everybody knows a woman who was abused in some way. Why are we mad about that? Why are we mad about the subject matter? Why are we mad about the supposed marketing of this book? Because I haven't seen this book marketed to young women or young adults or marketed as a romance. I haven't seen anybody holding up this book saying, this is the epitome of a love story. This is the perfect example of a love story. Because it's not that. It's the opposite. I haven't seen anybody saying those things. So I don't understand what the vitriol toward this book is. To me, honestly, the most unbelievable part of this book was that it wasn't worse. That Ryle wasn't worse. And that's not to say that the things he did were okay in any way. But the fact that he leaves after the big bad thing happens, he leaves, he goes to England and leaves for 3 months and just leaves her to her own devices. He's not constantly checking up on her. I kept waiting for her to find out that he had installed cameras in the apartment somewhere or something, or he had a personal, private investigator following her, or that he was going to show up at Atlas's house and find out that, and accuse her of cheating, or when he found out that she was pregnant, that he was going to accuse her of having slept with Atlas and the baby actually being Atlas's. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it didn't. He didn't use the baby against her. He didn't use the baby to emotionally manipulate her. He didn't use the baby to make her stay. He didn't lock her in a room somewhere. He didn't kill her, which is very much a reality for this kind of situation. I saw statistics somewhere that many women who are killed in an act of domestic violence are pregnant. Like I said earlier, every domestic violence and abuse situation is different. Every person is different. That's not to say that one situation is worse than the other, but it could have been worse. It could have gone a lot differently. There are situations where the man would have locked her in a room, and she couldn't get out. I know someone who has had that kind of situation where she was literally locked in a house for over a year before he just happened to be drunk and not lock the front door, and she was able to get out. It could have gone so differently. And so that honestly is the most unbelievable part to me, or not necessarily unbelievable, but just, I don't know, I guess that is the most unbelievable part to me. Again, I don't understand where all the hate for this is coming from. If you don't like ᴛᴏᴏᴅ as an author, if you don't, then that's valid. That's, everybody's entitled to their opinions. But I thought this book was beautiful. It's about ending cycles of abuse. In the end, Lily chooses her daughter and leaves to protect her daughter, but also to protect her daughter's relationship with her father. And maybe that's what you guys are mad about. Maybe because she didn't leave and then let her daughter know what an asshole her father was. Maybe that's the case. But as someone who, again, was raised in that situation and whose biological father died when I was a baby and I never had the chance to have a relationship with him. And again, as someone who witnessed my mom going through a really hard divorce and seeing the way that my brothers were dragged into the middle of it and manipulated and used against each other, I think the fact that she didn't do that and not only left for the safety of her daughter, but also to preserve that relationship, her own relationship with her daughter, but her daughter's relationship with her father, because he never hurt the daughter. He never gave any indication that he would hurt the daughter. And of course, you never know. But even in a normal situation, you never know. The whole last, I sobbed my way through the last, like, hour of this book, probably. Again, as someone who's been through this, has witnessed this, my mom didn't, yes, she did eventually leave the person who hurt her. Unfortunately, there's been more than one. She did eventually leave, but not before us kids witnessed what happened, and were dragged into the middle of it, dragged into scenarios where there were police called, and she was taken to hospital and court and all kinds of things. To see a woman who, a fictional woman, obviously, who ended it right then and there to protect her children, both emotionally and physically, I think is a beautiful thing. And I actually really liked this book. I was on the fence. I wasn't sure if I was going to end up hating it, if I was going to end up understanding where people were coming from, if there was going to be parts of this book that I felt like did romanticize what was going on or did explain it away. But I don't think that this book does that at all. I agree 100% that this book should not be marketed as a romance. It should not be marketed towards teens. It shouldn't be, like I said, held up as an example of a love story. But that doesn't mean just because a book has difficult themes or violence or any of those things doesn't mean that an author shouldn't write it. Ultimately, an author has no control over who picks up their book. And yes, the publishing companies have control over who the book is marketed to, but I personally have not seen this book, like I said, marketed to a young audience. So yeah, I don't know what to say. I like books that are real and authentic and relatable and that make you feel something, whether that's anger or sadness or pain or whatever it is. Some people can't read things like this because they're triggered and, sent into a bad mental state, but a book like this that shows the abuse, shows the thought process, shows the turmoil, shows the confusion, the anger, the hurt, the pain, and eventually the breaking of that cycle, I think is a great thing. I don't know how many times I can say I don't understand, but I don't understand it. Anyways, those are my thoughts. I don't remember exactly how many clips I took previously. I think Ryle is a horrible character. He was definitely in the wrong. There were a ton of red flags. She shouldn't have been with him from the beginning. I liked this book. At the end of the day, that's all I can say, is that I liked this book. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was really well written. The ending, like I said, had me crying. The author's note at the end had me crying. I gave it 5 stars. And I've read, this is like my 16th book, I think I've read so far this year, and this is the best book I've read so far this year. I do want to pick up, I think the other one is It Starts With Us. I do want to read that and see, because I know a lot of people have given that one hate as well. So I'm curious to see what that one is about. I think I said at the beginning of this vlog that I'm excited to keep reading other Colleen Hoover books. Like I said, I enjoyed her writing. In the end, I thought this was a good book. But yeah, that is it for now. It's enough of my rambling. Hopefully this made sense and I got my point across. But yeah, that is it for this one. Thank you for coming along on this reading vlog. If you haven't already, please follow down below. I'm going to be doing more of these. I'm currently reading the Throne of Glass series, which I have vlogs for. One vlog is up and I'm continuing the rest. And I have some other reading vlogs coming up. I will be reading It Starts With Us, and I will probably vlog that as well. So thank you for watching this. If you've watched all the way to the end, please like this video. Let me know down below which side of the fence you fall on while being respectful. And yeah, Please subscribe down below to see all of my next videos, and I will see you then.